was one of those babysitting gigs that already felt a little creepy from the start. The house was out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but darkness and silence. The baby was asleep in his room, and I was doing my best to stay calm, watching TV and counting down the minutes until the parents came home. It was about 10 p.m. when it happened. Out of nowhere, I heard it. This horrifying sound that sent chills racing down my spine. It was like a group of demons had gathered just outside the house, laughing, no, cackling, in the most unnatural, blood-curdling way you could imagine. It wasn't a howl or a scream. It was this hellish chorus of manic, high-pitched laughter. I froze, absolutely paralyzed with fear. My mind raced. Was it people? Animals? Something worse? I was in full-on panic mode, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. For several minutes, I sat there trying to figure out what to do. Should I call someone? Check the baby? Lock myself in the bathroom and cry? And then it hit me. I was in the mountains, in Arizona. It wasn't demons outside. It was a pack of coyotes. Apparently, when coyotes get together in large groups, they don't just howl like the movies would have you believe. They scream and laugh in this nightmarish, chaotic way that doesn't sound even remotely natural. I'd never heard anything like it before, and honestly, I could have gone my whole life without it. Needless to say, I felt like an idiot, but the relief was real. Demonic laughter. Just some scary as hell wildlife having their nightly get-together. Babysitting in the middle of nowhere, though, never again. Living in a rural spot has its perks: peace, quiet, and privacy. But that isolation turns on you in the dead of night when something goes wrong. It was after midnight when the nightmare began. I was drifting off when loud, frantic banging erupted at my front door. My first thought? My boyfriend, showing up unannounced for a late-night booty call. But as I approached the door, I glanced through the small window and froze. It wasn't my boyfriend. It was an unfamiliar, scruffy, bearded man. He hadn't seen me yet, and I backed away from the door, my heart in my throat. He was shouting, slurring, "Let me in," and kept pounding on the door. My cell phone was useless. This was a cellular dead zone. I grabbed the landline by my bed to call for help. Dead. The phone was dead. It was straight out of a horror movie, where the killer cuts the phone line. Adrenaline kicked in. I grabbed the biggest chef's knife I owned and locked myself in the bathroom. I climbed into the bathtub, crouched behind the shower curtain, gripping the knife with sweaty hands. My plan? If he busted through the door, I'd jump out from above and stab him between the neck and shoulder. Terrified as I was, I felt a strange sense of pride in my spur-of-the-moment badass plan. Then I heard it. He was moving around the house, banging on walls, sliding his hands along the siding, and trying every door and window. My bravery faded as I realized something horrifying. What if the landline wasn't cut? What if it just hadn't been charged in days? There could still be a working handset somewhere in the house. Now came the moment I'll never forget, the most terrifying decision of my life. I climbed out of my hiding spot, unlocked the bathroom door, and crept through the house to find another phone. Every sound felt deafening. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was still outside, trying to get in. Finally, I found another handset. Miraculously, it worked. I dialed 911. The dispatcher told me the closest officer was at least 15 minutes away. 15 minutes. An eternity. They told me to lock myself in the bathroom again and stay on the line. That wait felt endless. Every second dragged, the fear twisting tighter in my chest. But then finally, the sound of sirens broke the silence. Relief washed over me as police arrived and cuffed the intruder. The man, as it turned out, was a drunk, dirty hippie kid. He'd been at a party down the road, got completely disoriented, and thought my house was his friend's. He'd spent the last 20 minutes trying to get back into the party. For him, it was a dumb mistake. For me, it was pure, unrelenting terror. I'm still not over it, and I never let my phone go uncharged again. When I was 19, I stayed home alone for the weekend while my parents and brother went away. I'd had a rough night, and drunk me thought it would be a brilliant idea to reinvent myself. How? By pulling a Britney Spears and drunkenly chopping off all my long hair. Why? Because I was moving away to university the following week, and apparently, a dramatic hair change was the key to starting fresh. So, there I was, rinsing clumps of freshly shorn hair off my neck in the shower, feeling oddly accomplished in my drunken haze. I stepped out of the bathroom completely naked because, why not? I was alone, after all. Or so I thought. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed something odd. A piece of paper on the floor. Written on it were the words, "I was going to leave you a note, but I see that you are here." My heart stopped. My stomach dropped. Every horror movie I'd ever seen came rushing to mind. Panicked, I opened my bedroom door to grab something to wear, and there, standing in the middle of my room, was a guy. His hair was in his face, and he was grinning at me like something straight out of a nightmare. I did what any naked 19-year-old girl would do when faced with a stranger in her house at 2:30 a.m. I screamed bloody murder. And then, through the terror, I recognized him. It was a boy I'd dated briefly, like 2 weeks briefly, in my first year of high school, 3 years ago. The same boy who'd run away from home shortly after we broke up. Apparently, he'd heard I was moving away and decided this was the perfect time to break into my house in the middle of the night to talk. He didn't hurt me or threaten me. He even handed me clothes off my bed, which, okay, thank you for that small courtesy. Once I was dressed and the initial shock wore off, we sat and talked. About what? I can't even remember now. I was still shaken, confused, and yes, furious. Eventually, he left, and I locked every door and window in the house. Twice. Years later, I found out he'd been institutionalized with schizophrenia. It explained so much, but it didn't make that night any less terrifying. Looking back, I'm thankful nothing worse happened. But let me tell you, I still can't hear the phrase, "I see that you are here," without shuddering.